I want to talk a little bit about that movie, which many of you, or some of you, might have seen, I, Robot, which is based on, I think, a shorter story by Isaac Asimov, but it was lengthened for the sake of a movie to be able to be made into a movie. Um, and there's a couple different layers to this story. It's like one, yes, it does show a lot of the kind of fairy tale like misconceptions about AI that I've already discussed, um, about regarding consciousness, etc. But it's interesting how it unintentionally becomes more of a kind of story that is related to or connected to romanticism, um, rather than science fiction, at least for those sorts of reasons. I think that that and I'll give you an example, right? That like a séance, right? The consciousness of the robots is brought into being, brought into life, and but they become like a force of nature eventually that becomes unstoppable, right? They eventually become subversive. They fight against their masters, right? And that is not that different from in romanticism. There is often the idea of not only the supernatural and the beautiful and the sublime or whatever, but also the idea of using that as a way to rebel against this kind of very sort of rationalistic and this kind of maybe narrow-minded way of thinking, and it had a sort of a childlike spirit, and it's always about the paranormal, the spiritual, interfering with human affairs in that sense. So it almost seems more like it almost seems more like a fable, even though it attempts to try to give a more scientific picture of what the future will be, which if you look at it more objectively would look very different than what the story portrays. Obviously, if we were to look at things in a not as symbolic way, not as an allegory, as a fable, but in a very literal way, if you look at the future, obviously it really centers around the issue of, as I've discussed, the evils of a technocracy and what human beings really, the level of evil the human beings are really capable of, and how they can sort of misrepresent or distort information.